Welcome to our session on the art of adjusting feedback. First, recall a time when a manager, coach, teacher, or mentor gave you helpful adjusting feedback. What did he or she critique? How did it make you feel? What did you do as a result? And why do you think the feedback had the impact that it did? You may want to pause the video here so you can write down your thoughts. Recall that in our first session, we explored the elements of effective praise. Then in January, we explored the anatomy of trust through Brene Brown's Braving acronym. In February, we read and discussed an article on how to build successful teams. And today, our topic is adjusting feedback. When thinking about adjusting feedback, there are a couple of key mindsets to have. The first is that feedback is a gift. People need to hear from their leaders, peers, students, direct reports, what they're doing well and where they can improve. Otherwise, they're missing vital guidance that could contribute to a more productive or sustainable workplace. When colleagues share the mindset that feedback is a gift, and when we give that feedback with good intention, then we're gifting one another with opportunities to grow. Key mindset number 2, the conversation is the relationship. Strong relationships are built on trust, and trust is built on actions and words. Offering feedback is an act of trust. We're trusting our audience to receive the feedback, and we're showing them we care enough to make ourselves vulnerable to their reaction. So when we have those tough conversations, we're building our relationships with one another. I'll share that I'm personally committed to providing adjusting feedback when the need arises. So I've had some experience with these conversations. And thanks to the practice I've had, they come easier now than they used to. But I still get nervous, and sometimes I try to talk myself out of having the conversation. In those moments, it helps me to ask myself the question, what's the cost of not having this conversation? So think about that for a moment. If you avoid the conversation, what's the cost? Unfortunately, I've had to learn the hard way that the cost of not having the conversation can include resentment, gossip, lost productivity, stagnating growth, and superficial relationships. Our work is just too hard to add drama and wasted energy to the mix. By the end of this session, leaders will be able to articulate the impact of adjusting feedback on teachers and students and provide adjusting feedback to teachers and students in order to enhance performance and boost motivation. Let's recall from our session on praise that praise is just as important as adjusting feedback, if not more so. It gives people information they need in order to keep doing the right things. And it can set them up to graciously receive critical feedback or adjusting feedback when the time comes. Studies in educational psychology indicate that to receive critical feedback, kids need a 4-to-1 ratio of praise to criticism. So praising your people shows them you're in their corner, you recognize and appreciate their efforts, and that you want them to succeed. Again, it makes that critical feedback easier to receive later. Let's look at an example of effective adjusting feedback. See if you can identify some of the essential components. And note that the team in this scenario has established their norms and shared expectations for their work together ahead of time. Doing this is a best practice for many reasons, one of which is that when it's time to have the tough conversation, it's not as much of a surprise because it's based on norms that we've already articulated. So, your team has agreed to keep track of their own commitments and consistently meet deadlines. Today, a teacher was not prepared with a rubric, which prevented the team from moving forward on the design of a project. You ask him to stay for a minute after the rest of the team has left. You say to him, "We agreed as a team to meet deadlines for our commitments, You didn't bring the rubric to team planning today, so we weren't able to move forward with our project. Now I'm concerned about how we're going to have everything ready for Monday. I know you want to show the team your best work. It's okay to show us a draft. What's most important is that we meet our deadline so we can be ready on time. Please have the rubric for tomorrow. The team member apologizes and agrees to meet the new deadline. The two of you shake hands and part. What components did you notice? Feel free to pause here to jot them down. So the most essential element of feedback, of praise or adjusting feedback, is the evidence impact statement. Be sure to include that because it makes sure that the feedback is specific enough to be useful to the receiver. So in our example, the evidence was you didn't bring the rubric to team planning today, and the impact, we weren't able to move forward on the project. Some additional elements come from the 1 Minute Manager, and in that book they use the term reprimand, which is why you see it here. So recall the expectation or commitment, reprimand the behavior with true feeling, do it soon, be specific, tell the person what they did wrong, tell them how you feel about it, encourage the person with true feelings. Again, name the expectation or commitment, shake hands. So if you recall from our praise session, the 1 Minute Manager recommends that physical touch can make the feedback more impactful, which is why the handshake at the end here. So feel free to do that if it feels natural, if it feels comfortable. But if it feels awkward, it doesn't feel right, we don't want to make people uncomfortable, so you can leave out that element. I'll share that when I was first really holding myself accountable to having these conversations, I would script them out ahead of time and find somebody I trust who is willing to role play them with me before I had them with the person. And that's incredibly helpful in making a person feel ready to go into that conversation. So if it would be useful to you, I encourage you to do it. The example that we looked at today was pretty straightforward. So I think it's important to acknowledge that there are relationships that come with lots of baggage. Some behaviors are more complicated to unpack. And so in those complicated situations, you would want to set aside more time for a dialogue. And in planning for those conversations, my mantra is to seek to understand. The goal is not for one party to win, it's to build the relationship and improve things moving forward. So you could still begin with the evidence impact statement, then follow up with an invitation for the other person to offer insight. You could say something like this: I want to better understand what happened today and how we can avoid confusion next time. Would you please share your perspective with me? Recall the mindset that the conversation is the relationship. And if you'd like to explore this topic further, the book Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott is a great read. So when we leaders make the courageous choice to model effective feedback, our teams are more likely to have those powerful conversations with each other as well. Imagine the cascading impact: increased accountability, improved performance, stronger relationships, the list goes on. So I hope you'll give the feedback to the person for whom you just wrote your script and set a goal for yourself. If you see something, say something within 24 hours. The more you do it, the more natural it will feel. And if the adjusting feedback is balanced with plentiful praise, people are more likely to receive it well. It's been a pleasure presenting to you all this year. I hope you found the sessions helpful and informative. Please do fill out the needs assessment survey that you'll be receiving in your email so I can serve you even better in the 2018-2019 school year.